on the current state of affairs with regard to COVID. I had a very interesting call this morning with some of my colleagues in the industry and have a few things to share with you about that. I want to welcome Josh Silverman, our senior sales agent, along on the call. We'll have just a quick chat about the state of affairs in the sales market, and then also welcome back our intrepid attorney, Denise Ledbetter, to sort of join me in the discussion a little bit about the different COVID relief efforts that are going on. So the first, I'll start at the very, very top. And one of the first things that happened when we finally got past that very scary 3 weeks in our nation's history, where we thought that maybe the hooligans were going to take over the world, was that part of the Biden team's plan was a $25 billion relief package that includes funding for people who are falling behind in rent and need help with their bills. And that is going into effect at some point in the next week or two. And we're hoping that that money will be, we'll have more information on the parameters of how that money is going to be distributed, but it's there. And it'll be interesting to see, how that gets distributed. Applications in this circumstance are coming from tenants, not from landlords, which is a bit of a contrast with some of the other money. So that the tenants here are asking for money that they would give to the landlord to help pay their bills, as opposed to some of the other resources that are being made available that would have the landlords able to request the money for tenants who are behind. And so it seems like there's going to be a number of community-based organizations who receive this funding and are able to distribute it to the people who need it. We don't know which organizations are the ones who are, we don't know all of the names of the organizations yet. But Denise, what can you tell us about this, specific money? I mean, there are restrictions in terms of who's eligible for this money. Is that right? What kinds of restrictions are you aware of?
You're much more familiar with this than I at this point, considering your call today. But
Okay.
It's my understanding that there are restrictions pertaining to needs-based, and the level of monies, it's based on how much income you bring in and how much percentage of your income is the rent. So that is that's one of the primary issues for whether or not you're going to be receiving any funds.
Okay. And so then we have a state bill that's in the works right now. I guess it's AB 91. Hopefully will be signed by the governor by the end of the week. They don't know exactly what the amount of money is going to be. But it's interesting. This bill has I think this bill and the federal bill have a restriction. The money is only to be spent for people who make 80% of the area median income. So I think in San Francisco, that's like $131,000. So 80% of $131,000, any household making less than, call it 100 grand is going to be eligible for that, which is, it's a lot for us. It doesn't get you real far, but that is quite a decent income if you're talking about just one person. But you start getting into, families with children, and $100,000 doesn't take you very far, especially when one bedroom rents are still above $2,500 on average.
And JJ, if I may interrupt, interestingly, in San Francisco, they have different definitions of households. You can have 4 households in a unit. And so that's another whole discussion. Right.
So you could have roommates who all qualify as their own household with their own third or quarter share of that overall rent.
That's correct. Yeah.
And
yeah,
this is the CARES Act, right? The 25 billion.
Yes, that's correct.
And my understanding is 2.6 billion is allocated to California.
Okay.
And households will qualify for relief funds if they make 80% or less of the median income in their area and include at least one person who qualifies for unemployment or has experienced financial hardship because of the pandemic. So
So those seem
Covered a
like,
lot of people.
$6 billion. They're going to frame it kind of like the PPP program. It seems like with commercial, where you have,
yes,
you know, the occupant gets all the money and is forced to pay in full that money to their landlord in order to continue getting that money.
I would, you know, I haven't read or heard anything specifically about how the money is distributed, whether it goes directly to the landlord or it goes into the tenant's bank account. And I
Okay.
don't know how, I don't know how when, I don't know how the money would go from the tenant's bank account into the, you know, to pay off the landlord's bill, how they would keep the tenant from walking away with it if they really wanted to do that. But I don't think that in my experience so far through this pandemic, I don't think that the game playing is necessarily as much of it's not as bad of an issue as I thought it was going to be in the beginning. So you know, obviously there needs to be security when you're allocating $25 billion of federal money to help people, but you know it's not as much of an issue. But yeah, that if somebody has filed for unemployment as a result of the pandemic, and you know has an income that's below 80% of the area median income, that those are, it's a good place to start to give people assistance in this circumstance. So yeah, that's definitely, it's good to see. Now, unfortunately, I'm not sure that very many of us as landlords who have a need for this kind of funding, who have tenants who've been severely affected by this, are actually going to see any of this money. I'm not sure that it'll be allocated that way. I do get the feeling that a lot of this may end up going through to nonprofits and to, you know, low income housing and things like that. But that's probably where it's most needed. And so, you know, we'll see whether any of the tenants, just for in our business, we've got, you know, call it 650 units right now, and you know, with AB 3088 that passed in was it like September or August or September, the rule was you had to pay at least 25% of your rent in October, November, December, and January, and it was due by the end of January. And we had to serve a notice to tenants telling them if they hadn't paid their at least 25% of their rent. We served notices January 15th saying, you know, you've got 15 days to make your payment essentially of one full month's rent for the last 4 by the end of the month. And we only had to send 3 notices, which was really pretty amazing. You know, that's an incredible amount. And it's not to say that everybody else is fully paid up. I do have a variety of other people, but we're not talking about 10% of our portfolio is in some way behind in their rent. I mean, almost 100% of our commercial tenants are behind in their rent. But you know, it really is a small percentage. It's not a huge squeeze. So I'm really grateful that that's the case for us in our business, because I'd spend, you know, I don't know if I have enough time to go chase that much, you know, unpaid rent. Actually, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about eviction moratoria, because that's something I think, Denise, you'll be able to address a little bit more. We have the federal moratorium on evictions. Does that go to the end of June now? Is
Yes.
that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so no evictions for non-payment of rent related to COVID through June, and then we have the same at the state level.
That's
and
correct.
then there's a conversation about local preemption language that would prevent local jurisdictions from enacting stricter legislation.
Mhm.
I didn't quite catch that. I wonder if you are familiar with this concept that, you know, this is sort of like AB 38, or we've had this conversation before about local jurisdictions being unable to make more restrictive rent control legislation. Is that, are you aware of the mechanisms of local preemption of the state laws as it pertains to this COVID legislation?
No, I am
Evictions?
not.
No.
I am not aware of anything being bandied about in San Francisco County with respect to making it more restrictive than that which is imposed by the state. But that's
Okay.
not to say that it won't be.
Right.
because, you know, our board of supervisors can be very active and they're always looking for their votes. So
Right.
it's possible that it will be introduced, but I haven't heard anything in the last 2 days.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly preventing evictions is a worthwhile goal, and it especially when people have no other resources. There's also a lot of conversation going along. Thankfully, I'm not a party to any of it personally in my business, but there is a lot of discussion going on about how people have evictions that were filed before the pandemic began, before March. They even had the writs of execution issued in the first quarter of the year for some non-payment that also involved nuisance related issues, and they have tenants who are supposed to be evicted, and the sheriff's office won't evict them, even though, because the actual eviction itself will take place at this time, even though the non-payment of rent took place before the pandemic, and there's an ongoing nuisance that a tenant is causing in the building that is endangering other people, or interfering with the other residents' ability to quietly enjoy their home, or getting in the way of the landlord's ability to perhaps even rent units that are near those units. So, we have a variety of other issues related to evictions. Evictions are not just a blunt object for landlords to try to get their dollars. It's also a tool that we use to try to protect people from each other in a lot of circumstances. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. If anything starts to move in that, I'll let you know what I hear in that regard. Coming down to the local level, we have Dean Preston got his hands on $5.7 million of transfer tax money through the recently approved Prop I that increased the transfer tax on buildings of more than $10 million in sale value. And that $5.7 million is being earmarked for COVID rent relief, but it is only for people with 10 units or fewer in their building. And there are a variety of other restrictions related to that. Denise, have you heard anything else about the qualifications for this Dean Preston money? I mean,
No.
it is Dean Preston money, so you can almost bet that any of us who make money from rentals won't get it. But it is that's also there, and that's going to go pretty quickly. But at the same time, that tax is quite large. I think what is it? 0.5% of the value of the property is the tax. So you figure, a $10 million building, every time one of those is sold, $500,000 goes into this pot. So that's pretty significant. And I don't know what the sales volume is in the really big buildings, but that is an interesting source of funding as well that could help landlords and tenants through this crisis. One final piece of information that I thought was interesting was, we have a residential moratorium on evictions, and we have a commercial moratorium that goes through March, is it right?
Yes.
And that'll probably be extended as well. I mean, I can't imagine anything's going to change dramatically in the next 30 days that would allow us to, significantly reopen businesses. But we have no recourse for landlords who aren't getting rent in that circumstance. And now we have commercial tenants. Thankfully, once again, I don't think I have any commercial tenants in this circumstance, but commercial tenants who are unwilling or unable to pay their utility bills, and then the city putting a lien against the landlord for the utilities, even though the utilities have said that they're not going to be shutting off those utilities for people who are unable to pay the bills through the pandemic, which is just an interesting level of complexity. And, I don't know whether the city is going to be at all flexible with those kinds of situations. But, if you're a landlord and you've got a tenant who's got, I talked to a tenant with a restaurant the other day, and he was we were renegotiating his lease for another 3 to 6 months. And he said, look, because of the walk-in freezer and all the other things that we have in the restaurant, regardless of whether I open the doors or not, it cost me $2,000 in PG&E every month just to own the restaurant, because we've got a lot of equipment here that needs to run. And so, if people stop paying those bills and the utilities can't turn it off, and PG&E is a different example, but water and garbage are definitely something that we would get involved in as property owners and end up in a difficult situation. So those are kind of where I'm seeing COVID relief coming from, and what the topics of conversation that are being bandied about by landlords in this town. And once again, thankfully, we're not in the center, me personally, of a lot of this, but we're doing our best to help everybody as much as we can. Going back to the conversation about Prop I and the transfer tax, I think that's a pretty good way to segue into just a general talk. I mean, I don't see much in the way of activity in the sales market, Josh. It doesn't seem like much has reestablished itself yet, because there's still so much uncertainty and no demand for rentals. What are you seeing both in San Francisco and the East Bay? You're seeing a little bit of an uptick in the East Bay in the rental market, aren't you?
Rental market and San Francisco, actually, we have a unit that we're leasing in the Mission, getting a lot of hits, actually, strangely, surprisingly. So that's good. So more, I think that, and in the East Bay, definitely getting a lot more hits, a lot more activity. November and December were just abysmal. I mean, just silent. Yeah. But that's also kind of seasonal and normal. And then January is really perked up. I think, from a sales perspective, our conversation about that building on Langton,
yes, is
where a lot of owners are finding themselves with. This is a 3-unit building, 3 flats, and an illegal studio that's completely vacant. So it was rented to tech workers. They all left, and the owner comes to me, a client of mine, and says, should I rent it or sell it? Said,
no. Neither. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
You can't do anything.
So it's just a real tough, we're used to doing, rent or sell analyses in San Francisco all the time, and have great recommendations normally. And in this case, it's, can you call me in 6 months and we can have a more thorough conversation about it? Because it's a problem either way. It's hard to rent, hard to sell. So we're gonna dig in and figure out what is the price that makes this building go both ways. Can you rent 4 units? What's that number? And can you sell it? What's that number? But it's tricky. I mean, this is SoMa. So I don't know. Are you seeing any more activity in SoMa? I mean, it's a little bit ground zero.
Nope.
So it's quiet still.
It's quiet. So, and then remember, we're not renting unwarranted units, so they have to keep that vacant for a little while and maybe start the legalization process or merge it with the upper unit.
We're not renting unwarranted
no unwarranted units.
Because of liability?
Because of liability. If you rent unwarranted units, you probably will get sued for all of the back rent plus damages. So Denise has seen that many times. So an unwarranted unit means it's not legal to collect rent for it. So,
right.
Yeah. Bert, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things. I think now may be a good time, if he's willing to do it, to convert the unwarranted into an ADU, because the city is really promoting it strongly. And I think this would be, well, it's empty. This is a great time to do that if he or she is willing to do it. I'd like you to find out if the Preston thing, the Dean Preston thing, since I had 9 months with a tenant who didn't pay a cent and is now gone, if I could get rent relief off of that fund from that. I'm certainly not going to get it out of the federal funding because he's gone now. But but that might be that might be a help if it is the way he says it is.
Right. Well, we will certainly explore those options. I have a couple of other things to discuss in that regard with you offline, but we won't do that here because this gets posted to YouTube later. So in general terms, yes, you're right, but in specific terms, we'll talk about it further. But yes, just for you, Josh, the concept of, the unwarranted unit, for, I don't know, an owner operator who lives in the building or who uses it as storage or something is no big deal. But when you bring in someone from the outside to rent a unit that isn't legally recognized by the city, it's bad news.
Right. Which is different than us taking over a building with an unwarranted unit occupied in it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a different, you're just saying don't lease a unit.
Correct.
Unwarranted. But if it's occupied, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Well, you have to engage in a buyout discussion.
Yeah.
You have to buy that tenant out.
Can't force a buyout.
No.
Yeah.
No.
You want to get that unit vacant is what you're saying.
10 or 15 years ago, you used to be able to pull a permit to remove the unit from occupancy and then ask the tenant to leave because you were doing that. And then that morphed into this, gee, I'm going to sue for all the back rent plus damages, which is a totally different conversation, of course. So, yeah.
Yep. So sales market tough, rental market picking up.
Yeah. And it's really strange. I see buildings going on the market and you used to have a strict, schedule. The building would come out and they'd have a couple of open houses, and 2.5 weeks later it would be, okay, we're going to round up all the offers. And now they're sending these notices out that say, we'll review offers as they come, which means, I'm going to be getting this same notice from this same agent every week for the next 6 months until they finally get an offer. And, it's tough.
Under the headline, new strategic pricing.
That's right. Yeah. New and improved pricing. Like,
yeah.
$100,000 is not going to cut it on a $7 million building, buddy.
Yeah, there's just a lot of waiting.
Yes.
Single family homes doing great, condos so.
Yes.
Too much inventory in the condo market still.
Yeah.
Single family cranks along. I'm talking to, in East Bay, I have a friend who got 20 offers on a house, and then another one he wrote on 24 offers, and obviously those are mispriced. I mean, it's terrible.
Right.
But it just speaks to there's a lot of people out there looking for single family.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's still a lot of money out there because the money is practically free. I mean, the banks are still giving it away, especially in the single family sector, because single family is a fairly simple commodity compared to, investment property. So,
I just noticed from Chase on the multi-unit lender side, they're tightening their standards. Like, I'm getting loan quotes now that I would underwrite it and I'd say, okay, this is going to qualify for 2.7, 2.8, and all of a sudden the lender shoots me back an email and he's at 2.2.
Right.
What happened? It's just that the lending standards, they really changed. So they're lending, but it has to be just,
perfect.
Total home run for them.
Yeah.
Fully occupied and blah, blah, blah. And, 60%.
Yes.
Loan to value. So anyway.
And that new one that you had to have a bank account with 6 months revenue sitting in the bank account.
6 months. 6 months loan payment sitting there.
Yeah.
12 months.
Was it 12 months?
Yes.
Oh my God. 12 months, a full year of mortgage payments, just in case you lose your checkbook 1 month.
They just take it up front. They don't even let you keep it. They don't even put it in an escrow account.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
Well, that's that's where we're at. Here we are, end of January, and and it's raining, and they say that outdoor dining can start again tomorrow. So isn't that nice?
Oh.
Go back and eat sushi in an igloo. I think I saw that as a news article. So yeah, I'm ready for some igloo sushi. But the problem is I can't get a babysitter either. So what am I gonna do, right?
Yeah.
I gotta only go somewhere where I can take the kids with me, and they'll pop an igloo. So anyway. All right. Well, unless anybody has any specific questions, that's all I've got for you today about COVID relief funds and efforts to help people. And I hope I think I'm rapidly getting to the point where I actually know more people who have gotten the vaccine than who have been sick from the virus. So that's encouraging that I both that I didn't know that many people who got sick, and that I'm starting to know enough people who are getting vaccinated. So that's good news. So and they've relaxed that standard just to say, look, the one thing we can actually track is how old people are. So we're going to give it to people based on age and forget all the rest of the stuff about jobs and stuff. If people come out and get it, they just give it to everybody. People shouldn't be turning it down. So that's good news, and I hope we get along with that quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think they saw that was unenforceable. I mean, people were just saying, yeah, I'm in healthcare, and flashing something kind of official looking, but not really official. And it was ridiculous. It was expecting the people at the vaccine sites to go through all this nonsense.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to just say, show me your ID. Okay, you're old enough.
Right. It's just like when you go to the grocery store and you try to buy alcohol. If you were born before this date, you're eligible. Like, done. Yeah, it should be as easy to get the vaccine based on age as it is to buy alcohol at the grocery store. There you go.
There you go. See that on a billboard.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining. Bert, did you have a comment?
Just a real quick one. Denise, were you able to serve?
Nope.
You weren't. Okay.
Well, we'll talk about that. I'll give you an update. I just got an update for you today. So
okay.
I'll call you in a little bit.
All right. Good.
All right.
Thanks.
Very good. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Josh.
Bye.
Good to see everybody.
Stay
We'll talk
Bye,
again
everybody.
next week. Take care.
Yeah.
Stay warm.
Yes, stay warm.